That's the image I still can't wash out of my mind. A thin kitchen knife, hovering just inches above my chest, and the young man I'd been renting my upstairs room to, standing over my bed like he had every right in the world to be there. You don't forget a moment like that. You don't sleep the same after it either. And before I tell you the rest, let me say this. If you've ever lived alone, or ever trusted the wrong person, or ever felt danger in the place where you should have felt safest, tell me in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if my story feels familiar in any way, subscribe, because nobody should go through something like this alone. My name is Lorraine Powell. I'm 72 years old, retired for a decade, and still paying off a few debts that life, and my late husband, left in my lap. My modest little two-story house sits on a quiet street in Savannah, Georgia, shaded by old oaks that drip Spanish moss like the trees are forever whispering secrets. It's a peaceful place. Or, it used to be. I've always believed in minding my business, cooking my own meals, and staying out of trouble. My life was simple and small, and I liked it that way. Morning tea on the porch. A short walk to the corner store for apples and bread. Afternoon crosswords. Evening calls with my daughter, Melanie. The comforting rhythm of solitude. I never asked for chaos. I certainly never invited it. But life has a way of slipping something dark into the cracks you didn't even know were open. And in my case, that darkness came in the form of a polite, quiet tenant named Elias Green. He knocked on my door on a Tuesday morning in early spring, soft knock, the kind that makes you think a bird hit the window. When I opened the door, he stood there with a backpack slung over one shoulder and his rental application already filled out by hand. I'll admit it, he looked harmless. 27. Clean haircut. Clear eyes. Spoke softly, like someone raised by his grandmother. "Ma'am," he'd said, smiling politely, "I saw your listing. I really need a quiet place to stay for a few months. I don't drink, don't smoke, and I keep to myself. Most people will warn you about the loud ones. The messy ones. The ones who talk too much, laugh too loud, or leave their trash on the porch. Nobody warns you about the ones who behave too well. Rent was always on time. No noise. No visitors. No complaints. No mess. But here's something I've learned the hard way. Silence can hide dangerous things. Back then, though, I was just grateful. Melanie had been nagging me about finances, worried I'd fall behind. "Mama," she'd say, "you can't keep pretending everything's fine. Renting the upstairs is a smart idea. You're being stubborn." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was lonely, too. So I handed Elias the keys that same afternoon. And for the first few weeks, everything was perfectly normal. Almost too normal. He left early in the mornings before I even finished warming my tea and came home late. I'd sometimes hear his steps creaking across the hallway above me, but that was it. No music. No friends. No arguments. The boy lived like a ghost. Once, I baked a pecan pie and left a slice at his door with a little note. "Welcome, young man. Miss Powell." He left the empty plate outside the next morning, washed clean. Polite. Quiet. Invisible. But little things started nudging at the edges of my peace. Like the first time I saw him outside without realizing he'd come home. I was watering my ferns on the front porch when I felt that uneasy prickle, the one we women get when someone is watching us. I turned, and there he stood on the sidewalk, staring toward the house, hands in his pockets. He didn't look startled or embarrassed to be caught. Just blank. Then he smiled, lifted his hand in a small wave, and walked inside without a word. Odd. But I brushed it off. Because when you live alone, you learn to pick your battles, and sometimes it's easier to choose peace over suspicion. Besides, I'd always believed if you treat people with kindness, they'll return it. But as the days passed, that belief started to crack. I noticed he locked his door with 2 separate latches, even when he was inside. I noticed he flinched whenever the mailman walked up the steps. I noticed he always kept his blinds closed, even on bright days when the upstairs got hot enough to bake bread. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, like someone counting each step in their head. At first I thought I was dreaming, but the sound grew louder, closer, until it stopped right outside my bedroom door. I lay there frozen, holding my breath, and after a few seconds, the footsteps retreated, completely silent this time, like whoever it was didn't want to be heard anymore. I told myself it was probably the old house settling, or my imagination. But deep down, a small seed of fear bloomed. The next morning, Elias came downstairs unusually early, so early I still had my robe on and my hair tied with a satin scarf. He asked if he could borrow my ladder. For what? I asked. He paused for a beat, too long for such a simple question. Just for the window, he finally said. He didn't specify the window, and I didn't ask. I handed him the ladder, and he thanked me with that soft, polite voice. But something about the way he grabbed it, too tight, his fingers pale from pressure, made my stomach knot. Over the next week, the strange moments kept coming. Shadows moving where they shouldn't. A door upstairs shutting when I knew no windows were open. The faint smell of bleach wafting down the staircase. And once, I'm still ashamed to admit how long I stared at it, a single muddy footprint on the hallway floor. Not mine. Not his shoes either. Small. Thin. Like a child's. But there were no children in my house. I wiped it away before I could think too long about it. I kept telling myself not to worry. I kept telling myself not to judge him without reason. I kept telling myself I was overthinking because I lived alone and watched too much late-night news. But my gut had been whispering for weeks. And I truly wish, I had listened before that night. Before the moonlight caught the edge of a kitchen knife. Before I opened my eyes to find Elias standing over my bed, smiling like he'd been waiting for me to wake up. That was the moment everything shattered. And it was only the beginning. I didn't scream when I saw him standing there. People assume you'll holler, kick, fight, beg for help, but fear can do strange things to the body. Mine went quiet. My breath froze. My voice locked in my throat like it belonged to somebody else. What I remember most was the sound. A soft tap 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 against the knife. His thumb pressing lightly against the blade, like he wanted to feel how sharp it was. Moonlight washed across the room, and for a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then he tilted his head, just a little, and whispered, "You leave your window open when you sleep." My blood went cold. That window was on the second floor. No porch roof beneath it. No ledge. Just open air. I didn't hear you come in. I managed to say, though my voice didn't sound like mine. He smiled again, a slow, unsettling kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You sleep very deeply. It's peaceful," he said softly. "People don't usually sleep that peacefully unless they feel safe." I didn't reply. I couldn't. His fingers flexed around the knife, knuckles pale. For a second I thought that was it. I prayed in my heart, quietly, the way you pray when you know the end is close. But then, just as calmly as he'd come, he stepped back. "Good night, Miss Powell," he murmured, almost gently. He walked out of my room, closed the door behind him, and I lay there, shaking so hard the sheets trembled under me. I didn't sleep again that night, but I also didn't call the police. And to this day, I can't fully explain why. Fear does something strange to you, makes you doubt yourself, question your instincts, convince yourself maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe he was sleepwalking. Maybe he thought he heard something. Maybe it was some harmless mistake I didn't understand. But in my bones, in that deep place women hold their warnings, I knew better. That morning, I waited until I heard him leave before stepping out of my room. My hands shook as I checked the locks. The window latch was open, wide open, and the cold morning breeze pressed against my skin like a reminder. He wasn't lying. He climbed into my house. The rest of the day felt like a blur. Every sound too sharp, every shadow too long. My tea tasted like metal. The house felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were gently closing in. Around noon, my daughter Melanie called. "Hey, Mama," she said. "You sound tired." "I didn't sleep well," I replied.
She sighed.
"You're not supposed to be living alone like that." "I'm fine, baby." "You say that every time." "And renting to strangers?" "Lord, Mama, we talked about this." I almost told her. The confession bubbled up to the edge of my throat. But then I imagined how it would go. Her panic. Her yelling. Her insisting I move in with her. Her driving over with her husband and causing a scene. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to believe reality yet. So I swallowed it down. "No need to worry," I said. "He's a good tenant. Quiet." "Too quiet," she muttered. "Please keep your door locked." "I always do." That was a lie, but I let it sit there. After we hung up, I checked the front door again.
Locked.
Deadbolt turned. Chain secure. But I still couldn't stop trembling. That afternoon, I baked cornbread just to calm my nerves, the smell of butter and warm flour filling the kitchen, the heat from the oven settling my hands. Cooking always centered me. Even when my mind was trembling like wet leaves, cooking felt like truth, like familiarity, like something I understood. While the cornbread baked, I heard footsteps upstairs. Elias was home. I froze. His steps were slow, deliberate, pacing from one side of the room to the other. Then silence. A long silence. And suddenly, a low, rhythmic thud. Like something heavy being dragged across the floor. My heart thudded along with it. I wanted to believe it was furniture. A chair. A trunk. Something ordinary. But then came a softer sound. A muffled noise.
Quick.
Sharp. Almost like a gasp. I stood there staring up at the ceiling, hands still covered in flour. And that's when I realized something. He shouldn't be home this early. He always came back after 7. I checked the clock. It was 3:14 p.m. My stomach clenched. The dragging sound stopped abruptly, as if he knew I was listening. I didn't want to move. Didn't want to breathe. After a few minutes, the upstairs door creaked, just slightly. Then footsteps, soft, slow, coming down the stairs. I wiped my hands quickly, trying to act natural, turning to face the kitchen counter, as if I'd been busy. The steps reached the bottom. And when I turned my head, Elias was standing there in the doorway, staring at me with an emptiness that chilled me through. "Oh," I said, forcing a small smile. "I didn't hear you come in." He didn't answer. He just held something behind his back, something I couldn't see. "What are you making?" he asked finally. His voice was different now. Not soft. Not warm. Just flat. "Cornbread," I replied. "Would you like some?" He stared at me for a long moment, too long. Then he said, "It smells like my mother's house." A strange sadness flickered across his face. But then, as quickly as it came, it vanished. He stepped back, turned away, and walked up the stairs again, disappearing without another word. The whole house felt colder when he left. The cornbread finished baking, but I couldn't bring myself to eat it. That night, I locked every door, closed every window, wedged a chair under my bedroom knob. I still didn't sleep, not because of the footsteps, not because of the dragging noise, but because when I looked at my bedroom window, the one he'd climbed through, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A single smear of dirt. Not a fingerprint. Not a scrape. A smudge shaped like the tip of a shoe. He hadn't climbed up. He'd stepped in.
From the hallway.
Which meant he had been in my room long before he ever woke me with that knife. I didn't tell a soul about the smudge on the floor, not Melanie, not my neighbor Ruby, not even the police. Part of me still clung to the idea that maybe I was imagining things, that I was 72 and tired and seeing danger where there was none. But that wasn't true. I knew it wasn't true. My body knew. My bones knew. And yet, I stayed quiet. Fear keeps you still. Shame keeps you silent. 2 nights passed with no incidents. 2 nights of barely any sleep, my ears tuned to every creaking pipe and shifting shadow. But nothing happened. Not one footstep. Not one whisper. Not one door closing in the night. By the 3rd morning, I almost convinced myself the entire knife incident was some kind of sleepwalking mistake or misunderstanding. But then, right after breakfast, a knock on the front door broke through the house. Sharp, hurried, urgent. When I opened it, a woman stood on my porch. Mid-40s. Hair pulled into a tight bun. Work badge clipped to her shirt from St. Joseph's Medical Center. "Good morning," she said, flashing a strained smile. "I'm Detective Marla Dyson. May I speak with you for a moment?" "Detective." My heart tripped over itself. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "Come in, please." She entered, scanning the house with quick, practiced eyes, the kind that missed nothing. "I hope I'm not troubling you, Ms. Powell. Lorraine Powell." "Miss Powell," she said, nodding. "I'm looking into a missing person case. A young woman named Emily Hart. She went missing about 3 weeks ago." I froze. 3 weeks ago was when Elias moved in. Detective Dyson continued, pulling out a photo. A young woman with warm eyes and a small dimple in her cheeks smiled up at me. "She's 26. Last seen near the bus stop on Rowan Avenue." Rowan Avenue. Just 2 blocks from my house. I swallowed hard. I'm
sorry.
I don't recognize her." The detective studied me, like she was searching for something beneath my answer. "Have you noticed anything unusual recently? Any unfamiliar people around? Strange noises? Suspicious behavior?" My mouth dried. I wanted to speak. I wanted to spill everything. A knife over my chest. Footsteps outside my room. That muddy footprint. The dragging sound upstairs. The window latch undone. But fear pressed its cold hands around my throat. Elias lived right above me. He could hear everything. He might walk in at any moment. "No," I said quietly. "Nothing unusual." Detective Dyson nodded slowly, not convinced but not pushing. She handed me a card. "If you remember anything at all, please call." I slid the card into my robe pocket, feeling the weight of it like guilt. As she stepped back outside, she paused on the porch and turned. "Oh, one more thing," she said. "Do you have any tenants or roommates?" The question stabbed straight through me. For a moment, I hesitated, then forced a smile. "Yes, I rent the upstairs to a young man. He's very quiet." "What's his name?" "Elias," I said. "Elias Green." She wrote it down. Not casually, deliberately. "Thank you. Stay safe, Miss Powell." When she left, I shut the door and leaned against it, trembling. Stay safe. How was I supposed to stay safe when danger slept 10 feet above my head? That afternoon, I waited for Elias to come home. I told myself I would confront him, gently, casually, just to gauge his reaction. I practiced the lines in my head. "Everything okay upstairs? Need help moving something? Any reason you were up late the other night?" But when his footsteps finally creaked up the porch, My courage evaporated like mist on a hot day. He entered the house without a word. No greeting. No eye contact. He walked past me with that empty expression, his backpack slung across his shoulder. The zipper on the side pocket was slightly open, and I could see the metallic edge of something inside. Too thin to be a tool. Too long to be a pen. A blade? My breath hitched. "Elias," I said softly. He stopped, turned his head slightly, enough for me to see his profile. "Yes, Miss Powell?" His voice sounded normal, polite,
Calm.
but something about the way he stood, too still, too controlled, made my stomach twist. "I had a visitor today," I said. "A detective." His back stiffened, but he didn't turn around. "Oh," he said lightly.
About what?
I swallowed. "A missing woman." Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then, finally, he turned to face me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "That must be scary," he said softly. "To think someone around here might be dangerous." His lips curled into a small smile. And for the first time, I couldn't pretend anymore. There was something terribly wrong with him. He walked up the stairs without another word. The house exhaled when he closed his door. I remained frozen in the living room, my heart trembling in my chest. That night, I didn't cook, didn't watch TV,
Didn't even sit down.
I paced. I listened. At 11:27 p.m., I heard his door open. Soft footsteps traveled down the stairs. But they didn't stop at the bottom. They went toward the back door. I peeked through the curtain just in time to see his silhouette slipping out into the night, backpack on his shoulder. He looked over his shoulder once. Not toward the street. Not toward the sky. Straight at my window. Even though I'd pulled the curtain back only an inch, he knew. He knew I was watching. And he didn't blink. Didn't smile. Didn't frown. He just stared. Then walked off into the darkness. I stayed frozen for nearly 10 minutes before daring to breathe again. I waited another 20 before bolting my bedroom door. And when I finally forced myself to lie down, every nerve in my body screamed that something was coming, something I wasn't ready for. I didn't know it then, but the next morning, I would discover the thing that finally shattered any remaining piece I had left. Something that made my blood turn to ice. Something that told me Elias wasn't just disturbed. He wasn't just strange.
He was hiding something.
Something terrible. I woke before sunrise, not because I slept, but because exhaustion finally forced my eyes shut sometime after 4. When I opened them again, the sky was still a dull gray, the kind that makes the world feel half asleep and half afraid. The house felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Too watchful. I made myself some tea, though the cup shook in my hands. I needed something warm, something grounding, because my nerves felt like loose wires sparking under my skin. Elias hadn't returned yet, and that alone made my stomach twist. By 8:30, he still wasn't home. By 10, the sun was fully up, but my house was still cold. Around noon, I forced myself to go upstairs. I told myself it was practical, that if he'd forgotten to lock something, or if something needed checking, I had every right as the homeowner. That much was true. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going upstairs for practicality. I was going because the fear in my chest had finally turned into something sharper. Something like suspicion. Something that whispered, "Find the truth before the truth finds you." I stood outside his door for a long moment listening. Nothing. No steps. No breathing. No movement. The knob turned easily in my hand. Unlocked. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Bleach. Thick and sharp, the kind that stings your nose. But beneath it, something else. Something metallic. Cold. The second thing I noticed was how neat the room looked. Too neat. Bed perfectly made. Dresser drawers closed. Curtains drawn tight as a fist. almost like a hotel room, or a room staged for someone else to see. I stepped inside, careful, like the floor might break under me. And that's when I saw it. A small scrap of fabric, white, delicate, sticking out from under his pillow. I froze. My heart hammered, so hard it felt like it was rattling my ribs. Slowly, with trembling fingers, I lifted the pillow. Underneath lay a woman's scarf, pale blue, silk, embroidered with tiny flowers. It was beautiful, innocent-looking, but dried into one corner was a dark brown stain. Old blood. A chill crawled up my spine. I staggered back, nearly knocking into the nightstand. That's when something fell from the edge, a small, folded piece of paper. I picked it up.
Light. Thin.
Well-worn from being folded and unfolded many times. I opened it. It was a handwritten note. Emily,
Don't worry.
he'll never find you here. My breath stopped.
Emily.
The missing woman. My vision blurred. My entire body went cold. Elias hadn't just been hiding something. He'd been hiding someone.
Or.
He had hidden her. And then something else caught my eye. At the foot of the bed, slightly pushed under the frame, was a duffel bag. Not his usual backpack. Bigger. Heavier. I didn't want to look inside. Every voice of reason told me to leave it alone and run. But I couldn't. Fear is strange. Sometimes it paralyzes you. Sometimes it pushes you toward the very thing you should run from. I knelt down, grabbed the handle, and tugged it out. It scraped across the floor with a dull, heavy sound. My hands shook so badly I could barely pull the zipper. But when I did, the smell hit me first. Not rot. Not death.
But bleach.
So much bleach, my eyes watered. Inside were clothes, women's clothes. Folded neatly. Pressed flat. A pink sweater. A floral blouse. A pair of small jeans. A necklace with a tiny silver heart. Every piece was stained with faint, washed-out brown marks.
Blood.
I dropped the zipper. Stumbled back. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. Something dark pressed against my chest, squeezing like a fist.
Panic.
Real panic. I forced myself to breathe, but my breaths came out sharp and broken. And then, because the world wasn't done hurting me yet, I saw something else. Something tucked inside the small side pocket of the duffel. A phone. A cracked phone with a blue case. A lock screen photo of the same girl in the detective's flyer, Emily, smiling with bright eyes and windblown hair. Her phone. Her clothes. Her scarf.
Her blood.
In my house. Under the roof where I slept. Every beat of my heart throbbed in my ears. I needed to leave. I needed to run. I needed to call someone, anyone. But when I stood to grab the phone and run downstairs, the floor creaked behind me. A soft, slow creak. I froze. The kind of freeze that feels like your soul leaving your body. Then a voice behind me said, "Miss Powell, what are you doing?" I didn't have to turn. I already knew. Elias was standing in the doorway, blocking the exit, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his breathing calm, too calm. I clutched the phone behind my back without thinking. I was looking for you, I said, forcing the words out through a dry throat. You weren't home. He stepped fully inside the room. His eyes drifted to the open duffel, the pillow displaced, the scarf uncovered, and something in his face changed. Not anger, not fear, something colder, resignation, like he'd always known this moment would come. You shouldn't be in here, he said softly. My pulse thundered. I'm sorry, I whispered. He shook his head once. Slow, almost sad. No, he murmured. You're not. His hand slipped into his backpack. And when it came out, he was holding the same kitchen knife. My breath caught in my throat. He stepped closer, each footfall slow and deliberate. "You weren't supposed to find her things," he said quietly. "None of this was supposed to involve you." I backed toward the corner of the room, my shoulders hitting the wall. "Elias, please." He raised the knife, not fast, not with rage, but with calm certainty. "You should have just left it alone." His voice wasn't loud, wasn't trembling, wasn't emotional. It was final, and I realized, with terrifying clarity, that he had no intention of letting me walk out of that room. But there was one thing he didn't know. One thing I still had. Emily's phone, gripped tight in my hand. And my thumb was already pressing the side button 3 times. Emergency mode. SOS activated. A piercing sound suddenly erupted from the phone. Not loud, but sharp enough to split the moment in half. Elias's eyes widened.
"Don't," he hissed.
But I already had. I ran. I don't remember choosing to run. My body chose for me. Pure instinct, pure terror, the kind that grabs your legs before your mind catches up. 1 second I was pressed against that wall, and the next my feet were flying across the room. I dodged past him so fast, I felt the air from his arm sweep past my cheek as he swung. The knife missed me by inches. I barreled down the hallway, gripping the phone like it was my lifeline, which it was. The emergency alert kept blaring, sharp and shrill, echoing off the walls. It disoriented him just long enough for me to gain a few steps. "Stop!" Elias shouted behind me, the first time I'd ever heard his voice raised. I didn't stop, not even for a breath. The stairs loomed ahead, steep, narrow, the wood worn from decades of footsteps. I grabbed the railing and half ran, half fell down them, my slippers slipping on the steps. Behind me, I heard his steps, heavier, faster, thudding with a rhythm that made my heart nearly burst. When I reached the bottom, I turned left toward the living room, thinking I could maybe make it to the front door, but as soon as I reached for the knob, I heard it.
Click.
He'd locked the deadbolt from inside earlier. With the key only he had. My stomach twisted. No time. No options. I darted toward the kitchen. "Miss Powell," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Stop running." I didn't. I tore through the kitchen, nearly knocking over a chair, and yanked open the back door.
Locked.
My hands trembled as I fumbled with the lock, the metal cold and stiff under my shaking fingers. Behind me, footsteps. Closer. Faster. "Please," he said, his breath ragged now. "Don't make me do this." That one sentence almost made me freeze. Don't make me do this. Like hurting me was a duty, a necessity, a box to check before he moved on. I finally got the lock undone and flung the door open, but as I stepped out onto the porch, Elias grabbed the back of my sweater. A firm, desperate grip. I screamed, a raw, broken sound I didn't know I could make at my age. My knees buckled as he yanked me back with surprising strength. The phone slipped from my hand. It hit the porch with a crack. But even cracked, the emergency tone kept blaring. Elias cursed under his breath. He spun me around and slammed me against the porch rail, not enough to break anything, but enough to send a jolt of pain up my spine. His face was inches from mine. Sweat on his forehead. Trembling lips. Eyes wide and wild, like he was fighting with himself. "Why are you doing this?" I cried, my voice breaking. He shook his head violently. "I didn't want to. You weren't supposed to look through my things. You weren't supposed to know." "Know what?" I demanded. "What did you do to that girl?" His jaw clenched. A tear, a real tear, slipped down the side of his face. "I tried to save her," he whispered. I felt the words like a slap. "Save her?" I gasped. "With a knife? With her clothes stuffed under your bed?" You don't understand, he said, his grip tightening on my arm. I didn't hurt her. Someone else did. And he's looking for me now. He knows I have her things. He knows she told me.
He stopped.
His eyes flicked behind me.
Toward the alley. Then, a sound.
Not one of us. A car door slamming down the street. Elias's entire body tensed like a hunted animal. No, 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 he whispered frantically. I didn't look away from him. I didn't blink. I didn't have the luxury of blinking. What are you talking about? I asked. He let out a shaky breath. I was supposed to disappear. Change my name. Stay low. She trusted me. She trusted me. And now you know. Before I could process any of that, he tightened his grip again, shaking. I'm sorry, he said, voice trembling. I'm so sorry. He lifted the knife. I gasped. In the same second, a voice shouted from the street. Police. Drop it. A beam of light swept across the yard, cutting through the morning haze. Elias froze. I felt his grip falter, just enough. 2 officers charged toward the porch, guns drawn. Another rushed around the side of the house. The emergency signal from my phone must have reached them. Faster than I dared hope. Drop the weapon, an officer yelled. For a moment, I thought Elias would run, or fight, or resist. But instead, he slowly, carefully lowered the knife. His hands rose into the air. He didn't look at the officers. He looked at me. Please, he whispered. I never meant to hurt you. Then the officers tackled him onto the grass. The knife clattered on the porch steps. I sank against the railing, trembling uncontrollably as they pinned him to the ground, shouting commands. My chest heaved. Tears blurred my vision. Every muscle in my body shook like I was made of paper. One officer rushed toward me. Ma'am, are you hurt? I couldn't speak. I shook my head, but my vision spun. The world tilted. My breath stuttered. My knees gave way. The officer caught me before I hit the ground. Easy, he said softly. You're safe now. Safe. The word felt foreign. Impossible. Behind him, Elias was being handcuffed, pressed into the grass. He didn't fight, didn't protest, didn't scream. He just turned his head toward me one last time. His lips moved silently. A whisper I couldn't hear, but I read it anyway. I tried. Then they lifted him into the patrol car. The morning sun caught his face, and for just a moment, just a quiet second, I didn't see a monster. I saw a broken, terrified boy. Then they shut the door, and he was gone. The police car pulled away with Elias inside, its lights flashing silently in the soft morning sun. I stood there on my porch, leaning on the railing for balance, watching until the vehicle disappeared around the corner. My house, once my sanctuary, suddenly felt like the last place I wanted to step back into. Detective Dyson arrived minutes later, striding up my walkway with purpose, her notepad already in hand. She greeted me gently, but her eyes carried a storm, sharp, searching, trying to piece together what had happened before she even asked. Miss Powell, she said, her voice softening, I need you to tell me what happened. I didn't know where to start. With the knife hovering above my chest? With the footprint near my window? With the duffel bag full of bloodstained clothes? With Emily's phone? My mouth trembled as I tried to answer, but the words tangled like knotted thread. The officer beside me offered a blanket, draping it around my shoulders even though the morning air was warm. I found her things. I finally managed. Upstairs. In his room. The detective nodded slowly, urging me to go on. There was a scarf with blood. Clothes. A phone. Her phone. And there was a note. My breath caught. The note. I dropped it when Elias confronted me. It said, Don't worry, he'll never find you here. Detective Dyson inhaled sharply, her jaw tightening. Do you still have it? I think it's upstairs. She signaled to one of the officers. Retrieve it. Bag everything. The officer hurried inside. Detective Dyson turned back to me, stepping closer. What you did was brave, she said. Triggering emergency SOS like that, you might have saved your own life. I nodded weakly, though the compliment felt like a weight pressing on my chest. Brave wasn't how I felt. Brave wasn't how I looked. Brave wasn't what I was. I felt like a woman who'd been standing in her own home without realizing the floor had rotted beneath her feet. A small crowd was beginning to gather on the sidewalk, neighbors drawn by the flashing lights and raised voices. Ruby Hayes, who lived across the street, hurried toward me. Lorraine, she cried, rushing up the porch steps. Lord have mercy, what happened? I didn't answer. Detective Dyson stepped between us gently but firmly. Ma'am, please give her some space. Ruby backed off, but her eyes stayed glued to me, wide, horrified, full of questions she didn't dare ask aloud. I felt embarrassment rise in my throat, hot and heavy. It's strange, the way shame can creep in even when you've done nothing wrong. Shame for letting him into my house. Shame for ignoring the signs. Shame for nearly dying. But more than that, I felt watched, exposed. The whispers from my neighbors floated around me like smoke. Was that her tenant? I knew something was off with that boy. Did he hurt her? Do you think he killed that missing girl? Poor Miss Powell, living alone at her age. Their voices twisted in my ears. Detective Dyson guided me inside. Let's talk where it's quieter. I stepped into my living room, the same room where I'd considered him harmless, polite, respectful. The same room where I'd baked him cornbread, where I'd welcomed him into my home with the trust only older women give. The detective sat with me on the couch. Miss Powell, I need to know if he ever mentioned anyone named Emily. I shook my head.
No.
But he said something this morning. He said he tried to save her, and that someone was looking for him. Detective Dyson sat up straighter. Someone, that's what he said. Her jaw clenched again. At that moment, an officer approached from the hallway. Detective, he said, holding up a sealed evidence bag. We found the note, and there's more upstairs. My stomach dropped. More? He lowered his voice. Significant evidence, ma'am. Detective Dyson's gaze sharpened. We'll search everything. She turned back to me. Miss Powell, you may need to stay elsewhere for a day or two. This is a crime scene now. A crime scene. The word struck me with a coldness I wasn't prepared for. I nodded slowly. Ruby must have seen me through the window because a moment later she burst in again, ignoring the detective's protest. Lorraine, honey, you can stay with me, she insisted. You are not staying one more minute in this house alone. Detective Dyson didn't argue. She simply said, that would be wise. Two officers headed upstairs. Another dusted the doorknobs. One took photos of every corner. I sat there on the couch, clutching the blanket around my shoulders like armor, trying to breathe through the weight of everything. Elias. Emily. The blood-stained clothes. The knife. The night he stood over my bed. The dragging sounds. The child-sized footprint. And the note. Don't worry. He'll never find you here. My skin prickled. I whispered. Detective, if that note is real, that means Emily was scared of someone, and that someone might have followed her. Detective Dyson slowly nodded. We're considering all possibilities. I saw something flicker across her face, something that looked like fear mixed with urgency. She was worried, and not just about Eleanor, but about who might have been looking for her. Ma'am, she said, did you ever see anyone watching your house? Anyone unfamiliar? I hesitated. The memory punched through me like a cold fist. That day on the porch, when I saw Elias standing on the sidewalk, when he was staring toward the house, not at me but behind me, I swallowed hard. Detective, I think someone else may have been watching us. She stood up immediately. Tell me everything. As I spoke, slowly, shakily, her expression grew darker. By the time I finished, she said something that made the room tilt. Miss Powell, this may go deeper than we thought. In that moment, my little house, the one my husband and I bought 50 years ago, the one with creaky stairs and mismatched paint, felt like a hollow shell of danger. I pressed my hand to my chest. I wasn't just fighting fear anymore. I was fighting the truth. Elias wasn't the only danger. Something else was out there. Someone else. And they weren't finished. Because when the officers searched the backyard, one of them found something that made everyone go silent. A footprint.
Fresh.
Large.
Male.
Right under my bedroom window. And it wasn't Elias's. The moment Detective Dyson saw that footprint beneath my bedroom window, the entire atmosphere changed. Officers swarmed the backyard, marking the spot, photographing the soil, examining every inch of disturbed earth like it might whisper a name. I stood at the edge of the porch, holding Ruby's arm just to stay steady. That's not his shoe size, an officer said quietly. No, Detective Dyson replied. It isn't. She didn't look at me when she said it, but I felt her worry settle in the air like dust. They moved me out of the house within the hour. Ruby clutched her chest the whole time. Lord, Lorraine, you could have been killed. Twice. I didn't argue.
Didn't downplay.
Didn't pretend. Not anymore. My things were packed quickly. A few clothes, my medications, my late husband's photo from the mantel. The rest, they said, would have to wait until the investigation was done. As we drove to Ruby's house, the neighborhood blurred past the window. The mailboxes I knew by shape, the cracked sidewalk where I'd walked my dog years ago, the neighbors' gardens. Nothing looked safe anymore. Ruby tried to talk, tried to lighten the mood, tried to distract me with stories about her grandkids, but I barely heard her. My mind kept replaying the same terrifying images. Elias's shadow over my bed, the blood-stained clothes, Emily's phone, the footprint much larger than his. The way Elias whispered, I tried. And then silence. Ruby set me up in her guest room, a small but warm space that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. She fussed over me like a sister, making chamomile tea, arranging pillows behind my back, insisting I eat something. But when I finally lay down that night, sleep didn't come. Every creak of her house made my heart jump. Every passing car felt like someone pulling up outside for me. Hours crawled by. Sometime after midnight, a soft knock sounded at my door. Lorraine? Ruby's voice whispered. You awake? Yes, I said quietly. She pushed the door open just enough to peek in, her face lined with worry. Detective Dyson called, she said. She wants to update you. My chest tightened. News could mean anything. Everything. I followed Ruby to the living room, where the detective stood, hat in hand. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, she said, but we have developments. I sat. Ruby sat beside me. The detective took a breath. We questioned Elias. At first he refused to speak, but eventually he opened up. My hands clenched around my robe. He told us he knew Emily, she continued. She wasn't a stranger. She was his friend, a coworker. Someone he cared about. I blinked, stunned. He said she confided in him about a man who'd been following her. Someone controlling. Someone violent. She wouldn't tell him the name, just that she was terrified. The room felt suddenly colder. Elias tried to help her, the detective said. He let her stay with him. He hid her belongings to keep her off the radar. He planned to take her out of the city. Then where is she? I whispered. Detective Dyson hesitated. We don't know yet, she admitted. Elias claims she left one night while he was asleep. He woke up, found her gone, and assumed the man she feared had taken her. I covered my mouth, a gasp escaping. He chased him, the detective continued. But he lost them, and he's been running ever since. He said the only reason he chose your rental was because your house was quiet and because he thought Emily's pursuer wouldn't find him there. My stomach twisted painfully. All those nights, all those footsteps, all that fear. It wasn't random. It wasn't senseless. It was a desperate man hiding from a monster while unknowingly becoming one in his desperation. And the footprint, I whispered. Detective Dyson nodded grimly. We believe it belongs to the other man, the one Emily feared. Ruby grabbed my hand, her fingers trembling. We're searching the property, the detective said. Every inch. We will find him, and we will find her.
She paused.
Elias is being charged with breaking and entering, attempted assault, withholding evidence, and obstruction. But if what he says is true, he's not the only danger. I swallowed hard. And my house? I asked softly. She sighed. We'll keep officers posted outside tonight. You are safe here. Safe. There was that word again. I nodded, though the word didn't settle in my chest. It hovered somewhere above me, unreachable, fragile. The detective left after another round of reassurances. Ruby hugged me tight, then urged me back to bed. But sleep still wouldn't come. Around 4 a.m, I found myself standing by the guest room window, looking out at the quiet street. A police car idled a few houses down. The neighborhood was dark and still, the sky faintly bruised with approaching dawn. And yet, I felt watched. Not by Elias, by the shadow of the man Emily feared. The man whose footprint marked the soil under my window. The man who had walked my property at night without me ever knowing. Somewhere in the darkness, he was out there, hiding, watching, waiting. But as the first light of morning crept over the rooftops, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not yet strength, but something in between. Resolve. I had lived alone for nearly a decade. I had survived widowhood, arthritis, financial struggle, and loneliness. I had rebuilt myself from nothing more than routine and quiet hope. And now I'd survived this. My hands still trembled, my heart still bruised, but I was alive. Alive. And for the first time since Elias stepped into my home, I realized I wasn't done living. I wasn't done fighting. And I certainly wasn't done finding answers. Whatever had happened to Emily, whatever dangers still lingered, whatever shadows still waited under the surface of my quiet life, I was not going to shrink from it. For once, fear wouldn't silence me. I would tell my story. I would warn other women. I would reclaim my house. And I would not live in hiding, not from Elias, not from the man who hunted Emily, not from the unknown. That sunrise was the first one in years that felt like something new, like something waking inside me. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders and whispered into the quiet room. I'm still here. And that truth, that tiny, fragile truth, was the beginning of my healing. I returned to my house 3 weeks later. It still smelled faintly of bleach and dust, and for a moment I just stood in the doorway, letting the weight of everything settle around me. The worn floorboards, the faded curtains, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Everything looked the same, and nothing felt the same. The police eventually told me their investigation had reached a developing conclusion. They found traces of Emily's DNA behind the house. Not enough to prove anything final, but enough to confirm she'd been there. Enough to confirm Elias hadn't lied about everything. As for the other man, the footprint matched a suspect in a different missing woman's case. Someone violent. Someone known for stalking. Someone still out there. They never told me his name. Maybe they thought it would frighten me more. Maybe they didn't want me carrying a face in my mind that might haunt my sleep. But truth is, I already carried enough shadows. I still jump at sudden noises sometimes. I still double-check the locks on my doors and windows. I still catch myself staring at that spot beneath my bedroom window where the footprint once was. But I also water my ferns again. I make my tea on the porch. I breathe deeper. I sleep, not perfectly, but enough. And I remind myself daily that surviving something doesn't make you weak. It makes you wiser. Sometimes I think about Elias, not with fear, but with sorrow. He made terrible choices. He put me in danger. He kept secrets that weren't his to keep. But he wasn't the monster I thought he was. He was a frightened boy running from something he didn't know how to fight. I don't know if Emily is alive. I pray she is. And if she ever hears this story somehow, I hope she knows I would have opened my door to her too. Before I end this, let me ask you something. The same thing I've asked myself every night since. What would you have done if you'd been in my place? Tell me in the comments. And if you're still here listening, like, subscribe, and stay safe. Truly stay safe.